I'm Skylar Carter, 25 years old, and while everyone was chatting animatedly over Thanksgiving dinner, my father suddenly set down his plate, looked at me, and said, "Skylar, would $2,500 a month be enough for you?" I froze. "What do you mean?" I asked again. My father frowned, turning to my mother. "Genesis, you haven't been sending her the money?" My mother startled, the wine glass in her hand slipping and shattering against the floor. In that instant, I knew a long, buried secret was beginning to crack, waiting to collapse. But before I go on with the story, where are you watching this from? Leave a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so I can tell you the whole truth. I live in Lafayette, Louisiana, just about a 30-minute drive from my parents' home in Baton Rouge, yet at times that distance feels like an entire ocean. I live with my 2-year-old twins, Liam, an energetic boy with curls as soft as clouds, and Ava, a quiet girl whose jet-black eyes are always observing everything. Our rented apartment is on the second floor of an old building. The furniture is mismatched, the children's toys are scattered across the floor, and piles of unpaid electricity, water, and rent bills sit stacked on the dining table. I once thought my life would take a different turn. 3 years ago, right after graduating from Louisiana State University, I married Daniel Reed, my sweet college love, who had proposed to me right after the graduation ceremony. We were once happy, preparing a room for the twins, hanging ultrasound photos on the wall, and dreaming together of a complete family. But 6 months after Liam and Ava were born, I discovered that Daniel was having an affair with a female colleague at the architecture firm where he worked. That shock led me to choose an amicable divorce to protect myself and my children, but in exchange came a life of hardship, carrying the entire financial burden on my shoulders. While I made ends meet by hiring Maria, a part-time Filipina housekeeper, to watch the kids in the mornings while I worked remotely as an accountant for a small Texas-based company, in the afternoons I rushed to fulfill delivery orders, and late at night I tied on an apron for the night shift at the corner convenience store to pay rent and buy milk for my children. The harder I worked, the more I noticed the gap in the way my mother, Genesis, treated me compared to my younger sister, Skylar Carter, 27, who runs an organic cosmetics business and regularly receives generous financial support from our mother. Mom never hesitated to boast to relatives about Layla's big contracts, her business trips to Europe, and the photo of her in an evening gown at an event in New York. As for me, it seemed I existed in family stories only as a faded shadow. Occasionally, my father, Grayson Carter, a chief petroleum engineer working on an oil rig in Alaska, would call to check in, but since he was often away from home, I never thought he truly knew what my life was like. Until that Thanksgiving season, one of the rare times he was home, when a dinner that seemed so ordinary opened the door to a truth that would change everything. That Thanksgiving dinner was held at my parents' familiar, red-roofed house in Baton Rouge. On the long dining table, roasted turkey filled the air with its aroma, alongside a bowl of mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and the dishes my mother always prepared meticulously for large gatherings. Layla sat at the head of the table across from me, wearing a figure-hugging emerald silk dress, her wavy hair perfectly styled. She smiled radiantly as she told our parents about her new contract with a Korean cosmetics brand, occasionally glancing at her phone to check messages from business partners. My mother, Genesis, listened intently to every word, nodding with pride, occasionally chiming in with compliments that made Layla shine even more. I sat at one end of the table, between Liam and Ava, cutting turkey into small pieces for them, keeping on a polite smile. My father, Grayson, sat next to my mother, his eyes warm as he watched his grandchildren. He had returned from Alaska 3 days earlier, but this was the first time the whole family had sat down to eat together since he came back. In the midst of the lively conversation, my father suddenly put down his fork, looked at me, and asked a question that seemed to freeze the air. "Skylar, would $2,500 a month help you?" I froze, my hand still holding a spoonful of mashed potatoes for Ava. What do you mean? I asked again, my voice so quiet I could barely hear it myself. My father frowned, turning to look at my mother. You haven't been giving her the money? I thought all this time she'd been getting regular support from the trust fund her grandfather left her. My heart pounded, this time from shock rather than emotion. I took a deep breath, shaking my head slightly. I've never received a cent, Dad. A heavy silence fell over the table. Even Liam and Ava seemed to sense it, looking at me and then at their grandfather. My father slammed his hand on the table, his gaze fixed on my mother as he barked, "Genesis, tell me." My mother flinched, the wine glass in her hand slipping and shattering on the floor, the sound of breaking glass echoing. Her lips pressed tightly together, her eyes avoiding everyone's gaze. Layla hesitated, setting down her knife and fork, but said nothing. I sat there feeling as though I had been stripped bare in front of my family, while some long-buried secret had begun to crack open, ready to collapse. My father leaned toward my mother, his voice low but still clear enough for everyone to hear. "Genesis, the trust fund your father left for the two girls. What did you do with it?" My mother slowly looked up, a flicker of confusion crossing her face before it was quickly replaced with a strained smile. "I transferred it all to Layla. She needed the capital to expand her cosmetics company. It was an investment in the family's future." My father's brow furrowed, clearly unconvinced by such a simple explanation. All $275,000, the entire amount, to just one person? What about Skylar? My mother placed her hand on the table, her tone slightly sharp. "Skylar. She can manage on her own. Layla, on the other hand, is helping the family's reputation. Everyone knows her business is thriving and needs to ramp up its marketing." I sat there, hearing each word like needles piercing skin already calloused. I didn't know what hurt more, being deprived of my rightful share, or hearing my mother openly say I wasn't a source of pride for the family. Layla shifted in her seat, her eyes dimming slightly, but still remaining silent. My father turned to me, his gaze a mix of anger and regret. "You never knew about this?" I shook my head, my lips so dry I could barely open them. In that moment, I realized this truth wasn't just about a number or a sum of money. It was a living testament to all the years I had been overlooked, pushed outside the circle of my own family's priorities. The room felt heavy. The ticking of the wall clock sounded dry and deliberate, as if counting down to the moment when everything would shatter. Sitting silently in the car on the way home from my parents' house, memories of the past came flooding back like a film played in reverse. In the mornings, when Lafayette was still wrapped in mist, I would hand Liam and Ava over to Maria, the Filipina housekeeper, then sit down at the dining table, open my old laptop, and begin my remote accounting work for a small company in Texas. A cup of coffee cooled beside me as my hands moved constantly over the keyboard, eyes fixed on columns of numbers in a spreadsheet, all while half listening to the sound of my children's giggles from the next room. In the afternoons, I would slip on my jacket, sling a delivery bag over my shoulder and weave through streets scented with gasoline and freshly baked bread, handing each package to customers in exchange for a few crumpled dollar bills in tips. The Louisiana afternoon heat was sticky and oppressive, but I had grown used to the sweat trickling down my back every time I stopped at a far-off address. At night, after feeding the children, bathing them, and tucking them into bed, I would head back out, tie on an apron, and start my night shift at the corner convenience store. The sliding glass doors opening and closing, the smell of fast food, the repetitive beep of the barcode scanner, all merged into a mechanical rhythm of life. Occasionally, I would steal a few minutes' break, sitting behind the counter, watching the fluorescent lights reflect off the tiled floor, and wonder whether I was living or merely existing. Skipping dinner had become routine, not because I forgot to eat, but because every dollar saved could be turned into a cup of yogurt or an apple for Liam and Ava. One rainy night, while delivering the last order, my vision suddenly blurred. My steps faltered, and I collapsed, right there, on the sidewalk. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on a couch in an auto repair shop, strangers pressing a water bottle into my hand and asking if I needed an ambulance. I smiled weakly and shook my head, knowing I couldn't afford the medical bill. On the way home, the cold night wind whipped across my face, and I realized that this endless loop of morning, afternoon, night had been wearing me down piece by piece, both body and spirit. News of my collapse during a delivery reached my family faster than I had expected. Maria had told an acquaintance, and somehow, only hours later, my mother was video calling me. On the screen was Genesis's carefully made-up face, lips painted deep red, a glass of wine swirling in her hand. Her voice was calm, without a trace of panic or worry. "You have to take care of yourself, Skylar. You need to know your limits when you work. I can't always be there to help you." I swallowed everything I wanted to say, knowing that if I spoke, she would only reply with something like, "That was your choice," or "Layla works hard too, and she doesn't complain." An hour later, my phone buzzed with a message from Layla. "Heard from Mom that you're worn out? Maybe you just need to learn better time management. I'm busy too, but I still keep up my regular gym schedule." I stared at the screen, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Not a single genuine inquiry after my health, not even a simple, "Do you need help?" Only a reminder that I hadn't done well enough. That night, once Liam and Ava were asleep, I sat alone at the dining table, the warm yellow light falling on the pile of unpaid bills. In that moment, I realized that to my mother and Layla, my exhaustion wasn't a crisis. It was proof that they had been right to believe I would never amount to anything. And that realization, more than any words, made me feel completely estranged from my own family. 3 days after Thanksgiving dinner, I unexpectedly received a call from my father. Grayson's voice was hoarse and slow, a far cry from his usual cheerfulness. "Skylar, I'll be staying in Baton Rouge a while longer. Don't say anything to your mother." I froze, and before I could ask, he continued, "I need to find out what's going on." It turned out that on Thanksgiving night, after I left with the kids, he had already sensed that something was wrong. It wasn't just the missing trust fund, it was the way my mother avoided answering and the way Layla kept silent. He took 3 weeks off from the oil rig, claiming he needed a health checkup so as not to raise suspicion, and secretly rented a small hotel room near home to watch from a distance. In the days that followed, he quietly observed and discovered that my mother often visited an upscale bar in the afternoons, sometimes staying for hours. On weekends, she would drive to a casino more than an hour from the city. He asked an old friend who worked at a bank to look into it, and uncovered an even worse truth. My mother had mortgaged our family's beach house in Gulf Shores, the place we used to visit every summer, and lost over $110,000 in less than a year to alcohol and gambling. When he learned this, he sat in his car for a long time, hands gripping the steering wheel, fighting to control his anger. I only found out about these things days later, but in that moment, somewhere behind the silence, my father had already begun piecing together the clues to prepare for his next move, a move that would completely shift the balance in our family. Once he was certain of what he had uncovered, my father called me to meet at a small roadside cafe, the kind he often stopped at when driving home from the oil rig. He was sitting in the farthest corner, a cup of black coffee gone cold in front of him, staring out the window, though his mind was clearly elsewhere. As soon as I sat down, he slid a thick folder toward me, along with a few printed bank documents. "I don't want you to find out about this by accident," he said, his voice rough. Inside those pages were copies of pawn transactions, records of large cash withdrawals, and even debt acknowledgments from the casino. Each number felt like a knife cutting into me. But the deepest wound came from realizing that while I had been scraping for every dollar, my mother had been spending money as though it could never run out. My father took a deep breath and went on. I've filed for a transfer to the mainland office. No more being away from home for months at a time. I've also worked with a lawyer to reverse some of the fraudulent transactions. Whatever I can recover, I will. But more importantly, from now on, your financial support will come directly from me. No one else in between. I sat there, unsure what to say, feeling a mixture of relief and bitterness spreading through me. My father looked straight into my eyes, his voice firmer. And this weekend, I'm calling a family meeting. I want your mother to face her drinking and gambling, and Layla will have to explain why she let you struggle without ever offering a hand. It's time everyone heard the truth, from start to finish. The family meeting took place on a Saturday afternoon in my parents' spacious living room. The air at first was taut as a drawn string. My mother sat on the sofa, her hands clasped together, her eyes darting back and forth between my father and me. Layla arrived 10 minutes late, still dressed in a glamorous gown from a promotional photo shoot. My father scanned the room, his voice firm. Today, we're going to put everything on the table. He opened the folder and laid each sheet of paper on the coffee table. These are copies of the debt records. These are photos from the casino cameras. And this is confirmation from the bank. My mother gave a strained smile. Grayson, you're blowing this out of proportion. My father cut her off. Genesis, don't deny it. The proof is right here. She fell silent, the smile disappearing, her eyes darkening. My father turned to Layla. And you, for 2 years, while your sister worked herself to exhaustion to raise 2 small children, you never once offered to help. Why? Layla froze, her gaze shifting away. I just thought she didn't need it. I looked at her, my voice low. Did you think I didn't need it? Or did you never want to know what I actually needed? Layla pressed her lips together, saying nothing. In that moment, the room seemed to shrink, and the distance between my sister and me felt longer than it had ever been. After the family meeting, nothing changed overnight, but I could feel a different current moving through my life. My father immediately transferred me enough money to pay off all the overdue rent, clear the outstanding bills, and stock up on essentials for Liam and Ava for the next few months. The first thing I did was quit my night shift at the convenience store, choosing instead to spend evenings with the children, reading storybooks, doing puzzles, or simply holding them as they fell asleep earlier. By day, I still worked as a remote accountant and took on a manageable number of delivery orders, but most of my free hours went into a long-held idea: opening a store for safe, infant-friendly toys. I enrolled in an online business course, researched materials, safety standards, and social media marketing strategies. Each time I developed a new product sample, I let Liam and Ava test it, both to check safety and to watch their reactions. Seeing them laugh with genuine delight was nothing like the polite smiles I used to force at family dinners. Slowly, I began to feel that I was no longer racing against the fear of tomorrow, but moving, steadily, deliberately, toward a future I was building for the 3 of us. In the weeks that followed, Layla kept her distance, but one Thursday afternoon, as I was photographing a new product in our small kitchen, the phone rang. It was Layla. Her voice, at first casual, carried a hint of hesitation. Are you free this weekend? I'd like to come by and spend time with Liam and Ava. I paused for a few seconds before agreeing. That day, she arrived at my door not in her usual glamorous attire, but in jeans and an oversized sweater, carrying a large box filled with toys and books. She sat cross-legged on the floor, building puzzles with Liam, reading to Ava, occasionally glancing at me as though she wanted to say something but couldn't yet. When the kids went down for their nap, Layla finally sighed. I was wrong. All this time, I didn't pay attention to you because I assumed Mom would take care of both of us. But now I know. That wasn't the case. I didn't answer right away, just poured her a cup of hot tea. She went on. I want to help promote your store. I have a big following on Instagram and TikTok. If you're willing, I'll make videos reviewing your products. Her offer caught me off guard, and I was cautious. But in her eyes, I saw something genuine. Not pity, but a real desire to make amends. I nodded. Maybe we would never be what we once were, but for the first time in years, I felt that Layla and I were standing on the same side, even if only by a small step. Just a week after Layla offered her help, a product review video appeared on her Instagram and TikTok, drawing tens of thousands of views. In it, Layla not only showcased safe toys for infants, but also told the story of a single mother she admired, carefully leaving the name unsaid, though anyone close to us would know it was me. Orders tripled, my phone buzzed nonstop, and for the first time I had to turn down customers because I couldn't restock materials fast enough. That evening, after the kids were asleep, I received a text from Layla. Thank you for giving me the chance. I'm not good at saying sorry, but I hope you understand. I stared at the words for a long time before replying simply, we start from here. A few days later, our family was invited to a Christmas photo session at the mall. My father stood in the middle, holding Liam and Ava. My mother stood on one side, and Layla and I on the other, our hands brushing lightly. No one said much, but in the instant the photo was taken, I knew something had shifted. We weren't fully healed, but the silence was no longer a wall. It had become a space in which we could start learning to truly hear one another. A year passed faster than I had imagined. Late November in Lafayette brought a gentle chill. The maple trees had shed nearly all their leaves, revealing a pale blue morning sky. In our small apartment, the scent of freshly baked pumpkin pie filled the air, mingling with the laughter of Liam and Ava as they ran circles around the half-decorated Christmas tree. Thanksgiving this year felt entirely different. No heavy silences, no awkward pauses. My father was still working at the mainland office, visiting Lafayette every week to spend time with the kids, always bringing a bag of food and handmade wooden toys. My mother still kept her distance, but her words carried fewer comparisons now, and occasionally she sent baked goods or fruit for the children. As for Layla, she was no longer just my younger sister. She had become an unofficial business partner. Her videos continued to bring in new customers, and sometimes she even came over on weekends to help pack orders. Watching the twins carefully hang ornaments on the tree, I realized how far I had come, from nights of utter exhaustion at the convenience store to this moment, when I could spend an entire evening with my children without the constant shadow of tomorrow's worries. I didn't know how much more my family might change in the future, but at the very least, I had found my own peace and a new belief. I no longer had to walk alone. On Thanksgiving afternoon, I drove with Liam and Ava back to Baton Rouge. Along the way, the kids sang along to Christmas songs on the radio, clutching their new stuffed bears. When we arrived, my father was already waiting on the porch, wearing a thick sweater, his face warm with welcome. My mother opened the door, her expression hesitant, but she still bent down to hug the children. In the dining room, the table was set with care: golden roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie, and even the salad I liked. Layla arrived last, carrying a large red-wrapped box. Inside was a set of safe wooden toys for infants that she had custom-ordered from my store. As the meal began, conversation drifted easily between work, health, and old memories. No one mentioned the trust fund, the debts, or the past arguments. My father raised his glass. This year, we're all here. Not perfect, but honest. I looked around the table, my mother placing food on Ava's plate, Layla leaning toward Liam in conversation, and my father smiling at me. Perhaps the wounds hadn't fully healed, but this atmosphere, the presence, the small acts of kindness, was what I had longed for all these years. When dinner ended, we took a family photo. In the flash of the camera, I knew I had traveled a long road to reach this place, where connection no longer rested on pretense, but was being rebuilt from truth. That night, back in Lafayette, after putting Liam and Ava to bed, I sat alone in the living room, the warm glow of the lamp falling over a steaming cup of tea. The afternoon's laughter still echoed in my mind, mingled with quiet pauses when it felt like people wanted to say more but couldn't find the words. I realized that for years I had believed fairness in a family meant everyone being treated the same. But tonight, I understood that fairness sometimes begins when people admit their mistakes and learn to change, even if only a little. My mother was still distant, and Layla was still learning to step out from the shadow of favoritism, but I no longer depended on their recognition as a condition for living well. I had built the life I wanted, and my children were the clearest proof. They were growing up in love, safety, and the assurance that they were truly seen. I took a sip of tea, smiling at the thought of tomorrow, a busy morning ahead with new orders, fresh projects, and quiet moments with Liam and Ava. And for the first time, my heart felt light, because I knew I had stepped out of the cycle of neglect and onto a path of my own choosing. In the weeks after Thanksgiving, my online toy store continued to grow. Thanks to returning customers' referrals and Layla's promotional support, orders came in from all over, not just Louisiana, but Texas, Mississippi, and Florida. I began working with a small woodworking shop near Lafayette to produce custom designs, ensuring every item was completely safe for infants. Each morning, opening my email to a fresh list of orders brought a rush of excitement I had never known before. My father visited often, not only to see Liam and Ava, but to help me manage finances, review contracts, and advise on business expansion. He even joked, "At this rate, in a few years, I might need to hire you as my financial advisor." I laughed, but felt a quiet warmth in knowing I had earned his trust. Layla continued showing up on weekends, bringing her camera and fresh ideas for marketing. We weren't as close as we had been in childhood, but we had found a way to work together without the old strain. Above all, I could now see a future where Liam and Ava would grow up in a very different environment from my past, one where they would know their worth wasn't tied to pleasing anyone, but to living as their true selves. One late afternoon at year's end, with soft, winter sunlight streaming through the window, I sat at my desk surrounded by neatly packed orders waiting to be shipped. Liam and Ava played with building blocks in the corner, bursting into laughter whenever a wooden tower collapsed. Watching them, I thought of the road I had traveled, from nights of exhaustion on the night shift, skipping meals to save for formula, to this moment when the apartment was filled with laughter and the scent of freshly finished wooden toys I had chosen myself. My family was still imperfect, but I no longer wished for them to become exactly what I needed. Instead, I had built my own version of family, a community of loyal customers, friends willing to lend a hand, and above all, the unconditional love I had for my two children. My father once told me while driving the kids to the park, "Skylar, love isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's in the quiet but steadfast decisions." Now, I understood that more deeply than ever. I had learned to love myself enough not to accept being overlooked, and to love my children enough to give them a future free from the chains of favoritism or neglect. When the doorbell rang, probably a customer picking up an order, I stood, smiling. My journey wasn't over, but I knew I had already crossed the hardest stretch. The rest, I would write in my own way. If you've listened this far, thank you for walking with me through my story. I believe that somewhere out there are others like me, people who have been underestimated, left behind by their own families, yet still found a way to rise and build a new life. If this story has touched you, leave a comment to let me know where you're listening from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so I can keep sharing true stories from real people, journeys of resilience and hope. Because sometimes, just one story can be enough for someone to realize they are not alone.